Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Let's kick off with big tech. Critics are worried about big tech's role in the 2020 election and now the Biden team. Records show dozens of big tech alumni have either joined Biden's transition team or gained influential positions in his administration. Biden's agency review teams have more tech executives than tech critics. Social media professor Andrew Selepak told the Epoch Times that Americans want the government to investigate big tech. But he says there is a justified worry that if these tech giants become too embedded in any administration, this will not happen, and it could have an immense impact on users and the country. Although some experts say big tech could benefit from a Biden-Harris administration, not everyone agrees. Antitrust scholar John E. Lopatka previously told the Epoch Times that an aggressive antitrust policy is fully consistent with Democratic political ideology, and so any Democratic administration would be inclined to adopt it. Republican strategist Blair Brandt says the real risk is legislation. He told the Epoch Times that a Democrat-controlled House and Biden White House will have no interest in overturning the Section 230 provision, which in many ways got them to where they are. Biden's transition team didn't immediately respond for comment. Now, on the topic of big tech and Section 230, let's talk about the pandemic bill. While you might not be getting $2,000, you could still be getting a check. Senator Mitch McConnell has introduced a new version of the pandemic relief bill. It includes other issues that President Trump supports, but were missing from the other bill. Mitch McConnell's new relief bill comes after he blocked the other one on Tuesday. The Cash Act that Democrats support increased direct payments to $2,000. But it was missing two of President Trump's other demands. One is limiting legal protections for big tech companies by repealing Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, and the second is creating a committee to examine voter fraud allegations. While the $2,000 stimulus was rejected, the original $600 stays. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says they started delivering the $600 stimulus checks on Tuesday. The Internal Revenue Service, or IRS, said in a statement that eligible individuals do not need to take any action to receive this second payment, and the agency will use the direct deposit information it has on file to make the payment. The IRS noted that some people may see the direct deposit payments as pending or as provisional payments in their accounts before the official payment date of January 4, 2021. Eligible recipients will receive a payment of up to $600 for individuals or $1,200 for married couples, and up to $600 for each qualifying child. Dependents who are 17 and older do not qualify for the child payment. So who's eligible? According to the IRS, those with an adjusted gross income for 2019 up to $75,000 for individuals and up to $150,000 for married couples filing joint returns, and surviving spouses will receive the full amount of the second payment. The payment amount is reduced for people with an income above those amounts. Meanwhile, McConnell is calling on Republicans to follow the House's lead in overriding Trump's veto of the defense spending bill. Last week, Trump vetoed the Defense Act in part because it didn't remove Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. The law largely exempts online platforms from liability for content posted by their users. They can be held liable for content that violates anti-sex trafficking or intellectual property laws. Section 230 currently allows companies to block or screen content in good faith if they consider it obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable. Trump and his administration have repeatedly underscored the risks of unbalanced policing of user content on social media platforms, claiming that many big tech companies are engaging in conduct that limits conservative viewpoints and stifles free speech. The president has urged Congress to roll back the liability protections and vetoed a defense spending bill over lawmakers' failure to do so. Now let's go into the lawsuit against Vice President Mike Pence. A new court filing reveals that prior to being sued, Vice President Mike Pence didn't agree on a plan to overturn the results of the election. According to new court documents filed on Tuesday, before Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert sued the vice president, their lawyers disagreed on the Electoral College vote. Gohmert, along with a host of Republican lawmakers, filed a lawsuit against the vice president this week. According to the filing, Gohmert's lawyer detailed his argument in an email and had a teleconference with Pence's lawyers. The filing states those discussions were not successful in reaching an agreement, and this lawsuit was filed. Just as Biden did in 2017, Pence will preside over the counting of electoral votes during the joint session of Congress in January. Gohmert is among the dozen or so House members planning on challenging electoral votes during the joint session on January 6th. At least one senator is needed to sustain a challenge, and that senator has stepped forward. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley announces he'll object to the Electoral College certification process set for January 6th. The Republican senator says he plans to highlight the failure of some states to follow their own election laws. He'll also point out the unprecedented interference of big tech, urging Congress to launch a full investigation into potential fraud and irregularities, and calling on the chambers to take measures to ensure election integrity. Hawley joins a number of congressmen who say they'll object. Objections from at least one senator and representative trigger a debate and vote in both chambers over the Electoral College results. Now let's go into Gohmert's lawsuit. It seeks to strike down Section 15 of the 1887 Electoral Count Act. Gohmert is asking the court to give Pence exclusive authority to decide which Electoral College votes should be counted. The lawsuit states Vice President Pence determines which slate of electors' votes count, or neither for that state. Adding, if no candidate has a majority of 270 elector votes, then the House of Representatives and only the House of Representatives shall choose the president. It adds that the 12th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution contains the exclusive dispute resolution mechanisms over elections. Gohmert's lawsuit says the court should render a judgment on whether Vice President Pence, in his capacity as President of Senate and presiding officer of the January 6, 2021 joint session of Congress under the 12th Amendment, is subject solely to the requirements of the 12th Amendment and may exercise the exclusive authority and sole discretion in determining which electoral votes to count for a given state, and must ignore and may not rely on any provisions of the Electoral Count Act that would limit his exclusive authority and his sole discretion to determine the count, which could include votes from the slates of Republican electors from the contested states. Gohmert noted that GOP-selected electors in several key states being contested by Trump have cast votes for Trump and Pence. The Republican parties in the state said they did so to preserve lawsuit options for the president. Let's talk about the Electoral Count Act. According to the law, after the electoral votes are cast, they have to be accepted by the new Congress sworn in on January 3rd, under the presiding authority of the current Vice President, Pence. The House and Senate will meet together on January 6th, and if any state's ballots are challenged by one member of the House and Senate, the chambers must meet separately and vote on the challenge. The Electoral Count Act limits each challenge to no more than 2 hours of debate. If either of the chambers does not agree with the objection or challenge, it would fail. The electoral votes approved by the governor would count. However, as discussed in the article, if the discussion or debates never end, it would be a very different scenario. For example, if the electoral votes are challenged individually instead of collectively in each state, which is allowed by Electoral Count Act, then 2 hours for each vote would make this challenging process endless. If it drags to January 18th, the day a decision has to be made, then according to the Constitution, without an Electoral College winner, the Senate chooses the Vice President and the House picks the President. The Senate would most likely pick Pence, because Republicans still have the majority in the Senate for now. In the House of Representatives, when picking a president, the House votes by state delegation, and the Republicans control more House delegations. The House Democrats, as the slight majority, will never let that happen, which means no president would be elected. If no president is elected by noon on January 20th, the law of presidential succession comes into play. Republicans will claim that the president should be succeeded by the elected Vice President Mike Pence, while the Democrats will say the whole process was illegal and unconstitutional, and that the next in line is therefore the House Speaker, presumably Nancy Pelosi. That means in this case, Biden would not be president. And the Trump campaign announced that it was asking the Supreme Court to set aside Wisconsin's presidential election. It's so that the Republican-controlled legislature can choose how to cast the Senate's 10 electoral votes. The campaign asks in its filing that the Supreme Court declare the state election failed. It also asks justices to allow the Wisconsin legislature to appoint presidential electors to replace those pledged to Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. Records show that President Trump supposedly lost the battleground state to the former vice president by about 21,000 votes. The case might not have an impact unless the campaign's request to expedite it is granted. The campaign's earlier lawsuit to invalidate allegedly questionable ballots cast in 2 Wisconsin counties was rejected by the state Supreme Court. But what do you think is going to happen with all these legal disputes? Let me know below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.